Our topic today is feedback or continuous development for humans. I don't know how many of you are software developers. I am a software developer, and we have the practice of continuous development or continuous deployment, development, whatever, when it comes to software. And there we talk about feedback loops and about getting better as fast as we can with what we develop. As humans, we have the same option, but for that we need feedback. And that's why we're talking today about the practice of feedback, how to do it, and how to get better at it. So let me try to, okay. So I kind of already started, but why do we focus on feedback? Because feedback grows us. By improving our confidence in the things we're good at, when we are told that we're good at them, when we are told people value them, that's something that helps us improve. And that helps us grow our confidence, but also it helps us grow our performance by, also showing where we might improve, might grow stronger. And ultimately it leads to personal and professional development. And by that, it also improves our teams. It improves them first by the sheer practice of giving and receiving feedback. We build trust and we build better relationship and stronger teams. But also, obviously, as we grow the capabilities of the individuals of the team as a whole becomes stronger. And finally, oops, why is this not switching? It helps the company. Again, we bring stronger skills to whatever our engagement might be, whatever our tasks might be. But it also role models this practice of quick feedback loops, of welcoming and adjusting to feedback, both in our personal development, but also potentially in our product development, for example. It's a model for how we can be agile. So I guess we said that after every section, we are going to make a pause for questions, but it feels like this is too early. So I will risk it and just continue. So I'll hand over to Suzanne for the next section.
Yeah, so there are different thoughts and ideas about feedback spreading around there, but we want to share with you what we mean by feedback and what also will be like the basics of this talk when we speak about feedback. So we want to share some feedback basics with you. Can we go on to the next slide? So feedback is a gift. Whether it's done well or poorly, somebody has taken the time and effort and of course also emotional investment to give this feedback to you. So please say thank you. Why do we give feedback to someone? So usually because we care. We take time because we care about a person or also the relationship that we have with this person. And last but not least, you choose how you use that feedback. So you decide if this is important or a current priority for you. So remember, feedback is a gift, and also when you get a gift, it's yours and you decide how to use it and when to use it. Also keep that in mind when you give feedback to someone, because in the moment you gave it to someone, it's theirs and it's their decision what to do with it and whether they want to use it. Can we go to effective feedback should be fast. Fast stands for frequent. So feedback is like a muscle that it should be exercised, like similar when we're doing sports. The more often we exercise and we do the sports, the stronger our muscles get and the easier it gets and the better we become, at least hopefully. The same applies also to feedback. Feedback should also be accurate. So choose your words and tone of voice carefully. Make sure the facts are represented correctly. And it should also be specific. So the more specific you can be about the feedback you're delivering, the better it is. And in the end, it should also be timely. The further away you are from a situation, the less effective it gets. That does not mean that you should give feedback like 5 minutes after an incident or something happened. That might be still very much in the heat of the moment, and you might not have thought it through. But it does also not mean that you should not give that feedback like 3 months later. It might not be very fresh in people's minds anymore. And again, because of that, not really effective. Feedback can be positive or reinforcing, with the goal that you can let somebody know what they had impact on, and also to share with them what they're good at. This is important because it improves the confidence of the receiver, and it gives also insights to blind spots. People are often not even aware what they might be good at. On the other side, like the pink part of the slide, you can see some examples what is not so effective when giving feedback. So for example, you did great work on that project is not specific, because it's not clear what did you do well on that project. And also, I think the meeting went okay is again not specific and actually not really sincere. Feedback can also be constructive or redirecting. So you share that with the goal to tell someone what maybe did not go well or what the other person could improve. We might have a personal or professional responsibility also to let somebody know about that. This is important so somebody else can improve their capabilities and again gives insights to their blind spots. Often, again, we are not aware what maybe annoys other people or habits that we have that are not really effective in, let's say, meetings or other things would happen at work. So again, on the other side, we have examples what it should not look like. For example, you never deliver on your commitments is not very kind, and actually words like never or always are never helpful when we give feedback because it's also not specific. I don't think that meeting went very well is actually not really clear. So we would be in the end of the section, and I was wondering if there's already a question coming up.
Okay,
if you don't
see
have
heads shaking.
Then we can go on and give back to Vicky. And yeah, if anything else comes up, please feel free to ping your question to the chat.
Yes. So now that we know what we're talking about when we talk about feedback, or we are getting some idea, how do you ask for feedback? That's a typical scenario. We're saying a thought worker here, but really a lot of companies have the concept of some kind of annual review, and a lot of company and a lot of people for this annual review have to get some kind of feedback from people they have worked with to justify their annual review. And so that's kind of a typical scenario that happens. Now, usually in a normal setting where we could interact, I would ask, what is the problem with this question, with this email? In this case, I would just tell you because the weirdness of online meetups. Well, there are several problems. It's very unspecific. What are you asking for feedback about? The period is extremely long. It's 9 months. Who remembers what happened 9 months ago? Or maybe this project, you know, somebody has even moved off this particular team or this particular project and now is being asked. And also the context in itself is actually promoting a particular kind of feedback, because when people ask you in this way, they don't actually want constructive feedback. They want feedback that helps them get a pay rise or a promotion. And that's not the kind of feedback that will help you actually grow. It's that will actually encourage people to tell you, you did that, maybe you can maybe work on that, and this made me feel not in a particularly good way when you did this. It's a very particular kind of feedback you're looking for, and it's not the kind of that will grow you. Now, a better prepared example and a better situation. I'm not going to read the email. I'll give you 30 seconds to read it. Right, I hope that was about 30 seconds. So that is a much better way to ask for feedback. So first, there has already clearly been a conversation about it, and the person is following it up with an email. They're asking for particular things they're working on that they want feedback on. They're asking for a particular setting where they can be observed. So in this case, some kind of a presentation. And they have proactively scheduled a catch-up afterwards, after some time, giving the person who will give them feedback time to prepare, but also a relatively short-term follow-up. So that they are, in this example, the person asking for feedback has made everything possible to make the person comfortable, to give them feedback, because they have explicitly asked for it. They have explicitly asked for something very concrete, and they have actually given them particular pointers on what would be valuable feedback for them. So that is pretty much an ideal example of how you ask for feedback. In reality, most of the time you don't have quite so ideal an example, but you can still, for example, joining a new team, say, I'm working on those skills right now, or I am aware that I have those things that I'm not doing so well. So please, if you notice me doing X, for example, interrupting people in meetings, it's a favorite of mine. I tend to do it. I would very much like people to give me feedback when I do it, because I'm really working on it. So if you tell people that, you also make them more comfortable with coming back to you later and saying, you know, you kind of were interrupting in this meeting, and maybe think about that, right? Or maybe, you know, be more aware of that, because you have already opened that door. So, or for example, we pair in Thoughtworks. After a day of pairing, you can say, you don't have to ask about very specific things, but how did pairing go today? Well, I thought that it went this and this way, and do you want some feedback about that as well? Something like that. Anyways. So to recall, ask for specific and recent feedback. So make it personal, follow up with an email and an invitation if it's a setting where that is appropriate. Do tell people areas of focus. It makes it a lot easier for people to actually give you valuable feedback, and also to actually observe relevant behaviors, because, you know, you're not the center of people's world, so they might just gloss over a lot of things. If they know it's important to you, then they'll pay more attention. Do this regularly. Don't wait for pay review. How to not ask for feedback. Can you give me some feedback? What about? What period? It's very unspecific. It's not giving people any direction. So it makes it very challenging on the feedback giver to find something valuable to give you. Can you give me feedback on the project earlier this year? It's not recent. People don't remember specific if it was months ago. So the likelihood of you actually getting something valuable is very low. So can I give feedback only when someone asks me for it? That would generally be, again, a question I would like to ask the audience. But in this case, you get a joker. The answer is, I love a German word that is very perfect for that, is jein. So it basically means yes, kinda, but no. So what I mean under this is, of course you can give feedback to people who haven't asked for it. However, never ever blindside people with feedback. Never be, oh, let's just grab a coffee, and suddenly blah, you start telling people about some feedback that you have for them, or just pass by somebody and start giving them some feedback at their desk, or whatever else it might be. Be explicit. Say, I have some feedback for you. When would be a good time to schedule you know, a feedback session? Or would you want to receive it as well? You might preface it with, I have some feedback for you. Would you want to receive it? When would be a good time? And there comes another part, which is that sometimes people might actually say no. Doesn't happen often, but it happens. Sometimes people might say no. And you have to be willing to accept that, because we are colleagues, we work together, but we are not friends, we're not family. People can have things going on in their lives that make them overwhelmed. And sometimes it might just not be a good time where people can handle feedback. Feedback is difficult sometimes, and you should be also willing to accept a no. Again, it doesn't happen often, but you should, by asking the question, you should be willing to accept a negative answer. But always ask the question. That doesn't mean I'm encouraging you to just, because you don't want to know, to just, blindside people. Don't do that. So another section complete. Have there been any questions? It's still kind of early, but no, I see Jenna shaking her head. So I'm handing over to Suzanne again for the art of giving feedback.
So giving feedback, there's a model that can be used, the so-called Sbi model, what stands for situation, behavior, and impact. So define the context of the behavior in question, like when, where, or with whom did something happen. Define the specific behavior you're giving feedback on, what happened, specific actions, or specific quotes. And in the end, also define the perceived or real impact of the behavior in question, like how were you affected or who else was impacted by that. We have some examples for you that makes it a bit clearer. So at the client meeting earlier, you balanced sharing our ideas while hearing from them nicely. The client told me afterwards that they thought we clearly understood their needs. So this is quite specific in this case. And we have another example, like when you presented the proposal to the team, you presented everything and held all of the questions until the end. It made me feel like you don't welcome my input, and I also forgot a lot of what I wanted to say. So as we can see, situation, behavior, impact. This is something that you can keep in mind when you prepare feedback for someone, for example.
It is also, sorry to interrupt, but it's also very important, because you have to be very careful that feedback doesn't feel like aggression, especially when it comes to constructive feedback. And when you turn it on how it made you feel, be specific about what happened, be specific about what was the behavior, but then it is about the impact, especially if it's how it made me feel. That is a lot less judgmental, and it makes it a lot easier for the person to empathize with your feelings rather than feel attacked. So it's less of that makes you this kind of person, and it's more about it made me feel certain kind of way. Your behavior had an impact on me, but it comes across as much less aggressive. And that's very important, because you want to make people be receptive to the feedback. So de-aggressing it, de-escalating the perceived attack of it is very important.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, there comes the moment with a question where I usually would open this up again, and the question would be, why does it feel difficult? Also in this case, I will share some thoughts that I have about it, why it does feel difficult, but please feel free to add your thoughts that you have about it to the chat. So I think it usually feels difficult because if we did give constructive feedback, that we don't want to hurt someone, or it also feels comfortable at first, especially when we have not trained giving feedback that much. And we don't want to come across as a jerk. And also, I guess, usually I'm, for example, worried that the feedback will not be received that well. So that's what I have about that.
So how do we approach giving feedback in a way that helps us set the correct mindset? I don't know how many of you have heard or have heard about or read the book Radical Candor? Yeah, I see at least one thumbs up from Mia. So 2 thumbs up. So Radical Candor. Oh, I see. Okay, hands popping up. That's great. So Radical Candor is about the intersection between caring about someone personally and also challenging them directly. Or I would actually even formulate it as caring about someone personally enough to challenge them directly. And that's easier to explain by explaining what radical candor is not. So if you have ever been familiar with radical candor, you will see this graph everywhere, basically. And on the y-axis, so to speak, is about caring personally or not. And on the x-axis is challenge directly or not. So radical candor is different from ruinous empathy. Ruinous empathy is when you care about people, but you don't want to challenge them. You kind of coddle them, giving them insincere praise, or you just say, oh, like everything is great. Yeah, sure. But that is the kind of coddling, ruinous empathy that doesn't help people grow, because it doesn't let them know where they can grow, what are their actual strengths or what are their actual weaknesses. It doesn't give them any choices. You don't enable them, you actually make them kind of dependent and blind. And that's why this kind of empathy is ruinous. On the other hand, you have manipulative insincerity. Again, it can be very insincere praise or very cutting and insincere criticism. And it even can be sometimes self-serving. If you are trying, like almost competing with somebody for the same position and you give them wrong feedback or whatever it might be, you are basically not caring and also not challenging. You are giving people manipulative lies. And we all can understand why this is not particularly constructive or nice. And then there is obnoxious aggression. I always like to say that if you have to preface something like, with all due respect, but, or I don't mean to be, unpleasant, but, or mean, but, that's obnoxious aggression. You know you're being aggressive. You know you're going to hurt somebody's feelings and you're going in it anyway because you don't care and you want to challenge them. And often this is not feedback, this is hurtful, this is not constructive criticism, but it's just destructive, aggressive behavior. So radical candor is none of those things. Radical candor is coming into a feedback session with the idea of, I want to make this better. I want to help you be better. I want to, if there is a problem, I want to help this improve. I am not coming in because you have hurt me and I want to make you feel bad. I'm coming in because you have hurt me, but I want to make this better. I want to talk to you and I believe we can work this out, or, whatever it might be. But I'm saying even in a state of pretty acute conflict, in a team setting, for example, you can still come in this situation with radical candor, which means, yes, this is difficult, but I want to make this better. I care enough to make this better, to try to make this better. And this is what, but also will challenge the situation. So this is what radical candor is about. So it is not mean, it is very explicitly not mean, but it is clear. Because only with clarity and only with actually having a kind of sincere conversation about things can we improve and can we grow. So to wrap up the giving feedback session, give feedback that is clear and that is constructive. Set aside time to prepare, don't wing it. Generally you won't give the best feedback this way. Confirm your intentions are positive, especially in more fraught situations where actually there is conflict. You can start a feedback session, and I have done this in the past where I would say in a situation of conflict, this is hard for me. I do not feel safe, but I want to make this better and I want us to have this conversation. So I'm going to try to give you some feedback and then welcome your feedback. So set your intentions as positive and try to create and maintain safety by doing that, but also through the conversation. And finally, use the SBI model. Describe the situation, the behavior, the impact. Try to use this to formulate your pieces of feedback so that you can, again, be aggressive and make it more easy for people to accept. So again, how to not do this? In the kickoff this morning, I noticed you talked over the devs, and a couple of times I felt it shut them out. Actually, in this case, this is how to do that, because it's kind of, yeah, it is a clear feedback. So it is a situation, it's a behavior, it is an impact. So it is clear. I think there is an area, this is an area where you could improve your dev skills. It should be for their benefit. So again, this is a bit of a borderline one, because it could be construed as constructive, but it is also a little bit vague and a little bit like you can improve your dev skills. You're not giving people a lot to work with. Receiving feedback. Still me. Okay. Interesting. That was a section. So any questions?
The chat has been quite active, so we have several questions, in fact.
Interesting.
And maybe we can start with 3 of them for now and see how we go, if that's fine for you. Okay, cool. Right when you ended the section about blindsiding people with feedback, we got a question related to that. So the first question is from Ellie. Does not blindsiding people with feedback only apply for constructive feedback? Or also?
It applies more for constructive feedback, I would say, obviously, because criticism is harder to take. But in general, it is a good habit to get into, also for the positive or reinforcing feedback, to do it also the same way by asking people. Also because of the psychological trick, which is you don't want people to dread feedback. So if you're asking them, can I give you some feedback? And then you give them some quite positive feedback. And that is actually making the whole exchange be pleasant, right? Be something to not be dreaded, because everybody, even people who are quite familiar and comfortable with feedback, when you get the, can I give you some feedback? There is a question of, oh, what did I screw up? And you want to work against this. You want the feedback exchange to not be something that is necessarily about constructive feedback. So it's also about the habit of the exchange. But also sometimes it can be a little bit awkward if you're, not everybody is best at receiving positive reinforcing feedback. Some people might be embarrassed if they're receiving it in a more public setting, for example. I am one of those people. I get very awkward. So I would prefer if I get some, some warning, even for that. So I would say, yes, more for constructive feedback, obviously, but I would also do the same with positive reinforcing feedback. Obviously, if it's just like, well done, you can do that, but.
Great, thanks very much, Vicky. Cool. The next question we have is from Pauline, and Pauline asks, any tips on giving feedback to your team leads in a feedback meeting, annual, or in my case, a halfway point during starting a new job, if you're not sure they really want or expect it?
I would say, so this is a difficult setting, right? Because it's already a setting where it's probably a thing where they're expecting that they will be giving you feedback, and it's this manager versus managed kind of setting. I would say explore whether they'll be open first to not give that just on a halfway point, and you can open the door by saying, hey, I would like to make sure that I'm on target to, meet the halfway, like what is expected of me at the halfway point. Can we have more regular check-ins? Can we maybe do it like every month? And then you can, in one of those check-ins, ask them also, hey, would you be open to also me giving you some feedback about how, the working relationship is? Because you already are having this setting working against you, that it's your halfway checkpoint, and it's also just half a year. That's already a very long period. So I would say explore whether you can shorten the period, and again, opening the door by asking for something that you want, right? That they can help you with, by saying, I want to hit the targets. Can we have more regular check-ins? And use those, because otherwise, if you have to do it in this setting, then again, I would open it with the question. Basically say like, hey, would you be open also to hear some feedback from me? And then see how that goes. There are not many other better options I can think of to do that. And then try to do it the proper way, as in do it with the Sbi model. And so. But this is like last ditch option in my view. I would go for trying to make it shorter intervals and more informal.
Thanks a lot. Then I think we'll just take one more question for now, and that is from David. Does refusing to accept feedback not lead to a situation where the trust is affected, either from the receiver, i.e. they have criticized me, perhaps I better tread more carefully, or from the person providing the feedback, they're not open to feedback?
If it's a thing that this person is never open to feedback, then yes. I mean, then something is, wrong with that relationship. And then you might have to, depending on how bad this is, like if it's a feedback where you really are struggling, you're trying to talk to somebody to improve the situation, they're not open to it, then you might have to involve a person as a mediator, for example, to actually make sure that this conversation happens, because the refusal is kind of not an option in this case. I mean, this is not working for you. You're not functioning. But there are settings, like if this person is generally open to feedback, if you know that is somebody you have had positive, constructive working relationship with, and then at some point you ask them and they say no, then I would give them the benefit of the doubt. Probably there is a reason they're saying no, probably something is going on. People find it very difficult generally to say no, to be honest, especially if they have previously accepted feedback. You kind of, even if I have had this where I was going through a lot personally, and people ask me to give me feedback and I feel like I have to take it, right? But it can be a load. It can be a lot still to take. You might not have the space. So I would say, again, that's a very consultancy answer, but it depends. It depends on what your relationship with this person has been up to this point. If you know that this person is generally a person you have a conversation with, a constructive relationship with, and then suddenly they're saying no, then I would say give them the benefit of the doubt. If it's a new colleague, give them at least 2 more tries and then make judgments, right? And then make kind of decisions about what that might mean. Jean, do you want to add anything to this?
No, I would agree that, like, if it's a usual case, then yes. But if it's just a thing that somebody says, like, I can't accept it right now, then yeah, it depends usually on the situation. That's a difficult thing about it, right?
And usually if people say no, they'll say something like, you know what, I right now, no, but then let me follow up with you in 2 weeks. And then my advice would be make copious notes, because 2 weeks is already period enough to start forgetting things. But people will generally not say like no forever. They might say no right now.
Great, thank you. I think that is that fine then for this question period. Would you like to go on? All right. Thank you.
Are there a lot more questions?
We have at least 2 more and then some comments.
Should we continue, Suzanne? I like handling the questions because I find this to be the most valuable part of this, where people ask things that are actually interesting to them, but we'll make sure to have the time at the end. Yeah. All right, so receiving feedback. We're not robots. It's a very inconvenient thing because we keep having emotions. Even when we think we want feedback and we think we want to receive it, it still can be hard to process sometimes. And you can go through an emotional journey. You can experience shock. Really? I mean, you're saying this to me, or I did what, or it was perceived what? Or anger. I clicked twice clearly, but anger. How dare you say this to me, in different versions. Or resistance. This is not true. This is a lie. I didn't mean that. I didn't do it this way, whatever it might be. Finally, if you go through the emotional journey, maybe you reach acceptance. This is the stage where you can process. But otherwise, you might end up emotionally running for the exit in terms of feedback. So an important thing to know is that all this is normal. We all occasionally go through this. No matter how much you receive feedback, no matter how much you have done trainings and trained even people, as in my case, to give and receive feedback, you still will sometimes have these reactions, and it's normal. It's not the question of stopping to have the emotional reaction. The question is, how do you process the emotional reaction? How do you deal with it? Do you let it out and tell to the person, how dare you, or this is not true? Or do you process it internally and say thank you? I kind of gave away what the right answer is. So, but why do we reject feedback? What are the triggers for those emotional reactions? There are generally 3 broad groups of triggers. There are truth triggers. This is not true, it's unfair, it's factually inaccurate, I didn't do this, kind of thing, kind of feeling. Or there are relationship triggers. How dare you say this to me after all I did to you? Or for you, or how dare you say this to me after what a word you have been to me, right? Whatever this kind of relationship might be, challenging the feedback on the basis of who the person is and what your relationship to this person is. And identity triggers. I am not this kind of person. I am not a rude kind of person. I am not an unfair kind of person. I am this person, and whatever I'm hearing is challenging what I believe to be as a person. Those are broadly the 3 groups of triggers that cause us to emotionally try to reject the feedback. So how do you deal with this? When it comes to truth triggers, examine your blind spots. Maybe we're not, you might have not meant for something to come across a certain way, or you might have not realized that someone will perceive it a certain way, but that doesn't mean that the way they receive it or perceive it isn't true. And maybe you have to examine how you might come across in situations, even if you don't mean to, for example. Relationship triggers. Try to identify what is the relationship that is causing you to reject the feedback, and acknowledge it and set it aside. Because no matter who the person is and what relationship you might have with them and what you might have done for them or they might have done to you, there still can be truth in the feedback that they're giving you. So look for that rather than looking for the reasons to reject it. And maybe in looking for that, if this is a relationship which is, you know, kind of triggering and difficult, maybe you can also find the ways you are contributing to the difficult dynamic, and it can improve. So again, give it a chance and hear the feedback. And identity triggers. We all have to acknowledge that we are not static entities. You can generally not be an unkind, you know, you can be a kind person, and then in the morning before you have had your first coffee, you might be a rude goblin, you know, kind of thing. Or, you know, if you have not slept enough, or you had a difficult day, or we're all complex individuals who react to our environment, and in different settings can be different. So acknowledge that you might not be as static of a person as you think you are, and again, be open to learn more about yourself by hearing, and maybe become better. And Suzanne?
So there are actually two parts of receiving feedback. So the actual part of receiving it, and also the way how you react on it. So that can be quite crucial, because if you react very defensive or aggressive, and even if that happens, don't come back to the person later, they might be scared or shy away and will not give you feedback again. So remember, feedback is a gift, and giving tough feedback is hard. And also recognize you may have a subconscious reaction, but that's okay. Reflect on why it is hard to receive it and get curious. So to break it down, don't get mad, get curious. Instead of asking what is wrong with this feedback, try to ask what might be right about it. So when you get a feedback like this, like the sentence here, you're always late, you can react like, why do you tell me that? Like, what is wrong with this feedback? Always, I don't think so. What about yesterday? I was on time yesterday, or 2 minutes here or there. That isn't a big deal. But you could also ask what might be right about it. So this tells you something about this other person. The other person really values timelines, for example. Even 2 minutes does not get unnoticed by them. And regardless if it's true that you're always late or not, you can learn from that to the other person, this is quite important. And the next time you have a meeting, you can take it under consideration, or remember it and be on time. Just to have it as a simple example.
So to wrap up, feedback is a gift, treat it as a gift, and you decide how to use it. Now, that is always a bit of an interesting point that I like to make at this point. When you say you decide how to use it, that also means you might decide to ignore the feedback, and very often it is true. So say me as a developer, I get the feedback of, you can really, you know, you can improve on your functional JavaScript skills. But at this point, I'm mostly focusing on improving on infrastructure. I can put it in my backlog. I can say, thank you for the feedback. It's, you know, it's nice to know. Can you recommend me some books? And put it in my backlog. But I decide to not focus on this right now because it's not my focus. But if somebody is saying, when you interrupt me in meetings, it makes me feel like I'm shutting down and I cannot contribute to the team anymore. And, you know, I don't feel like I am valued in the team. You can ignore this feedback. It's still a gift that you have been given, a pretty hard gift for somebody you are interrupting and making feel unwelcome, to actually reach out to you and try to tell you how they feel. You could ignore it, but the cost of it is pretty high. So the question you have to ask yourself is, can you afford to ignore it? And what kind of teammate or person would you be if you decide to ignore it, right? So it's still a gift, it's still your choice, but you have to carefully think about some of those choices because of the cost to the team and the dynamic. But again, it's a gift. You decide how to use it. Some suggestions. Make it a conversation. So be curious, ask questions, ask to clarify, reflect back what people are saying. That's a very good technique. If you say in your own words to verify that you have understood what they're actually telling you as a feedback. So that makes people both feel heard and acknowledged, but also makes actually sure that you have understood them correctly. Take notes for later reflection. Manage your emotions, especially if it's a difficult piece of feedback. Do not be reactive to it. You know, it's normal to feel whatever you're feeling, but if you are actually serious about wanting people to give you feedback, it's very important that you are welcoming to it. And thank them for their time, thank them for their effort. Generally say thank you. Don't deny, don't justify, don't say things like, I wasn't talking over others. It was just a high energy meeting. You might have been high energy in the meeting. Maybe other people didn't feel like they could be so high energy in the meeting, you know? So don't deny, don't justify. I can't believe you're bringing this up. I noticed you were late last week. Don't deflect, don't digress, and don't make it about the other person. So fine. Actually, I keep forgetting. It's another section. Do we have some questions?
Yes, we do have some questions. 3 so far. The first one is from, The first one is from Mia, and it is, how do you balance giving feedback with a gender bias, like Dunning or imposter syndrome, for example? And I think this was asked in the sense of feeling good enough and important enough to give a person feedback, and considering the gender difference, if you're a woman giving feedback and the recipient is a male, for example.
Interesting. Most of the feedbacks I have given, woman here, and most of my recipients have been male. So, you know, it's an interesting question. I have given this training so many times and nobody has asked me that. So, you know, that's an interesting one. Imposter syndrome is difficult. It is. I am quite familiar with it, and when it mugs you badly, right? When it attacks you, it can be pretty difficult to deal with. I would say first train the muscle of giving feedback. So don't start with the most challenging ones, because giving feedback is hard. So if you start with the most challenging ones where you fear rejection, you fear that somebody will be, will make you feel somehow in a way that reinforces the imposter syndrome, don't start there. Start with a situation where it's more on equal footing with somebody who you feel more comfortable with, just to build up the comfort with the process itself and with the feedback being received. So I would generally just say start smaller if you're finding this hard. And also, I think it would help if you ask the person what would they like to, if you ask them for feedback. So if people always receive react very nicely to being asked to give you feedback generally. So you're opening the door by first asking to receive, and then ask them if they would like you to give them some feedback. That also sets up the thing of, it's a bit of a trick, because if you have already asked them to receive their feedback and they have given you some, and then you ask them, would you like you to give them some feedback? Generally, a lot of people will feel kind of like a bit of an asshole to say no. So it's a bit of a trick there, but again, and start with something, start with the giving again, not with the most difficult thing you want to tell them. If there is something that you find particularly challenging and you feel like they might reject it, start with something smaller. Start with something you can feel like you can build a rapport with them with, so that you feel more comfortable in the exchange. And again, in this situation, if it is something that is crucial and has to happen now, if it's a feedback that you need to give and you don't feel comfortable, and you feel like this person might minimize you and might reject the feedback, then I would say this is a situation where a mediator might be appropriate. A mediator is somebody that I tend to say it's more of a last resort thing. But if you do not feel safe in a situation to give a feedback, that might already be a situation where it's a last resort thing, right? You need to feel like this won't impact you, for example, professionally, or you won't feel like it will be a negative thing for you. So depending on what the grade of the problem is, whether it's just about you kind of feeling insecure, but actually the person is receptive, then, build up to it. But if you're actually feeling like this might be threatening in some way to you, then that's a different kind of situation. Did that answer the question?
I'm looking for, if you, thumbs up, great. Thanks, everyone. Okay, the next question we have is from Friedrich. What can I do when I ask the boss to be so kind to give me a feedback and the boss answers no?
That's an interesting boss. I mean, my cheeky response would be look for another job. My less cheeky, that's the cheeky response. The not cheeky response is, if that is a boss that works with you relatively directly and they're not open to giving feedback, then again, I would suggest trying to introduce the practice within the team, if you have a team. So make the boss observe, without actually forcing them to participate, make them observe that the team is starting to get into this practice. The team is benefiting, the team is enjoying it. Let them stay to the side, occasionally invite them in, occasionally say, would you like to take part? If you're doing something like, and we'll talk about practices like a Feedback Friday or whatever, give them the choice to not participate, but keep doing it with the team if the team is open to it. Eventually, most people, even the grouchiest people, tend to get curious and tend to want to try. You cannot force people to give you feedback. You cannot force people to give you a gift, right? But you can try to demonstrate to them the value. So approach it this way. But if this person is like, if it's a kind of a culture of the company that is just not open to this, then yeah, my cheeky response might be my response, really. If you want to be empowered to grow and to be empowered to talk to people and to have the trust, that might not be the right organization. I would give it a try to change it, but it might not be doable, depending. Again, if you're only one person, you can start by giving them this video. See whether they'll, a lot of people are also not comfortable because they feel, and that's part of the reason we do this meetup and this training in general, is if people don't know how or what people actually mean by feedback or how to give it. Like I have had discussion, I've had on clients, actually bosses, so to speak, approach me and ask me like, hey, can you just give me a one-on-one? People want to talk to me, want me to run one-on-ones, and I don't know how to do this thing and how to do those feedback things. I've had this happen. And so you talk to them about what is actually to expect and what is feedback and how to give it, how to receive it, all those things. And then they feel more comfortable. Some bosses might actually feel uncomfortable because they feel they need to know this, they need to be better, they need to already be good at it. And if they feel insecure, they're like, just no, don't want to do it. So maybe finding a way to introduce them might help as well, depending on what it is, the problem.
Thank you. Would you like, oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask if that answered the question, but I think Susanna also muted herself.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to say that we also can see here, like on the two question, that in general it is, that's why also Vicky said when you switch your job, but overall having established kind of a feedback culture in your organization, because if this is kind of implemented and a bit more structured and there is a process about that and people get also more training, then the situation also gets easier, and it's also not that easy for your boss to say no if this is like kind of your culture in your organization.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Would you like to take one more question now or to move on to the next section? Okay,
We are almost towards the end anyway, so we can.
Okay, cool. Then we have one question from Diana. When someone gives me feedback without asking me, I feel that the situation is emotional and the feedback not constructive. Would you recommend to mirror that back somehow later, for example?
I would say you can absolutely give feedback about the giving feedback, but be careful with that. So I would say first say thank you. Even if you're not feeling like it, just do say thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Ask some questions if you can. Control your emotional reaction. And after that, after you have said thank you and all these things, formulated something like, I was not quite prepared for this. I would like to be better prepared. I would like to take some notes to make better use of your valuable feedback. Could you please next time just schedule something with me in advance and ask me when it would be a good time? Like, I really want your feedback, but it would be better received this way, or it would be easier for me this way. And yeah, it's a kind of a weird thing to thread, where you want to be able to give back the feedback about the feedback giving, but at the same time not come across as defensive or rejecting the feedback. So therefore I would say first accept it, ask about it, thank the person for giving it to you, and then ask, maybe next time, could you do it please a little bit different? Yeah, it's difficult when people feel that they're free to blindside you with feedback. So it's a difficult situation. If you're not prepared for that, it's a lot more difficult to control your emotional reactions as well. That's very understandable.
Thank you. So we do have another question, or else I would invite you to continue as you like.
We can do the question.
Yeah. Okay, the next question is from Maria. If someone's behavior at work or any other place influences you in a negative way, and you will have to cooperate in the future, but they are 1, not able, or 2, willing to receive constructive feedback, what is your suggestion?
So the behavior of the person influences negatively, they're not open to feedback. That is, again, a difficult one, and depending on the culture of the company, it can be a challenging situation. So I would say, if there is the possibility to have somebody in, as it sounds, it may be somebody in the position of authority, might be a thing that is required, mediate this session and help you talk to this person. I would try that. I would always try first to talk to the person directly without a mediator, but again, I'm from what you're saying, I'm assuming tried, not receptive. So in this case, I would say try to see if you can find somebody who is willing to mediate a conversation and capable to do that. In general, I would reach out to something like HR departments or whatever it might be, just because, or a manager might be the natural person to go to. And if going to an HR department is viewed as an escalation and whatever it might be, that's tricky again, depends on the context of the company. but I would see if I can find somebody who can facilitate that conversation. In the end, though, there will be situations where people just unfortunately don't want to hear it and don't care, and then you might not have any kind of recourse that is through the means of feedback. I'm a strong believer in feedback, but feedback requires people to be receptive to it. It's an exchange, and it's an exchange of two willing parties. If the parties are not willing, then feedback can no longer be an appropriate tool. So if that cannot work, then you might have to go through some more formal means of ensuring that your safety, like emotional safety or work safety in the team, is ensured, be it complaint or whatever. Again, feedback is a wonderful tool, but it's not a cure-all. It's not a panacea of every problem. You have to have people who are willing to talk.
Thank you. So that's all the questions we have so far.
Okay. So we're moving on to, you have received the feedback in the best way possible, and the people have given you perfect feedback. How do we apply it?
Yeah, so about applying feedback, there are actually two aspects about applying to feedback. So first, understand the feedback and then plan your actions. To some suggestions would be like, understand the perspective of the feedback giver, look for patterns and seek for more feedback. So maybe if you ask others, they will share similar feedback, that they actually also feel that this is disturbing, or you're good at something, or I don't know. So look for something, for patterns. Check if it fits with your goal and priorities. So remember, feedback is a gift, and you decide how to use it and what to do with it. And also if it fits to your current goals. And then in the end, also plan your actions to reinforce and redirect and follow up with the feedback giver. So come back to the person and respond to the feedback or follow up with them. So again, I've heard this before, like look for patterns that there are, or also set your own personal goals.
And finally, how do you create a feedback culture? It's all well and good to have received a training to know what good feedback is like, to know that you have to create your, control your emotional reactions, and it's a gift and all those things. But a feedback is most powerful if it's a culture of a team, or even better, a company. Occasionally also of a family. That's a thing that happens to you if you do a lot of feedback trainings. Occasionally with your partner, you're like, thank you for this feedback. Anyways, essentially, if you're willing to take it, now have the mantle of a feedback champion. And now you have to help people make it a habit. And in general, just like when you're exercising, and before it becomes natural and easy and you just roll out of bed looking forward to your morning session of running or whatever it might be, first you need to set like 5 alarms and make yourself and have a running buddy and make yourself drag yourself out of the house and do it regularly and do it every whatever. Feedback is kind of like this. It's not easy. It becomes easier with practice, and the practice comes easier if it's part of a ritual. So I would say for the beginning especially, it's quite important to set a feedback ritual of some kind, or a mix of feedback rituals. So some suggestion is something like Feedback Fridays, where everyone commits to giving feedback to some people, or speedback sessions. So speedback is kind of like speed dating, but with feedback. Or you gather the team and everybody pairs off with everybody, and they have 5 minutes for each pairing 2.5 minutes for giving feedback, 2.5 minutes for receiving feedback, and then you switch. It's very dynamic, it's very fast. You won't get the most in-depth feedback, but it's a very nice way to get feedback feet wet, so to speak, to get some dynamic from first feedbacks. And also sometimes things crop up, then you schedule something and talk more in depth about with the people. So you can also do a survey form where you send out to people a survey about, hey, those things I'm working on, how am I performing on those things or whatever. And then if something interesting crops up, you can schedule a follow-up chat, especially if it's not anonymous. You can set up a calendar reminder to collect feedback or to share feedback, and pair up with a buddy for regular feedbacks. And I don't mean just with one person, but pair up with somebody, for example, every week, whatever, and share feedback. Don't just choose one format and stick with it. Try different things. Different things might fit better to different teams, and also the dynamism of it helps to not get boring. Give people regular nudges, especially in the beginning. And you can discuss your progress. You can have a buddy or a sponsor about this, whatever helps to stay on track. And again, to begin with, it feels quite daunting. So it really helps if you can make it part of a ritual or habit. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. We're getting so many thank yous in the chat. Lots of people giving you shout outs for a great presentation. Maybe there's some more questions coming. If you do want to ask a question, this would be a good time to put it in the chat. I thought about sharing, there's a really nice comment from Francisco about the value he got from feedback in his own team. I wouldn't mind sharing that if that's okay from the chat.
Sure.
Okay, Francisco writes, it is as important to know how to receive feedback as it is to know how to give. I had a colleague in one of my teams that was giving aggressive coding feedback to a newcomer. After I gave him feedback, he decided to hold a presentation to the team, very much in the format given here. I was positively surprised and really appreciated it. I believe it's a good idea to bring this conversation to every team so that everyone is on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very nice experience that this person was receptive and actually proactive about improving things. That's great.
Nice. Well, those are all the questions we have right now.
Cool. Well, if there are no more, then thank you all for coming. I hope that was enjoyable and valuable. And go forward and give and receive feedback.
Thanks, everyone.